The medical ship Hope's Dawn moved slowly through the dark space between stars. Its white hull gleamed under the light of distant suns marked with red crosses that meant the same thing across the galaxy: healing, not war. Captain Lisa Stone stood on the bridge watching the stars through the wide windows. She had commanded this floating hospital for 3 years, and still felt proud every time she saw those medical symbols. The ship was huge, almost 2 miles long and filled with medical bays, surgery rooms, and recovery wards. It held 2,000 patients from 17 different alien species. Some had blue skin and 4 arms. Others looked like giant insects with gentle eyes. A few were made of living crystal that sang when they were happy. All of them came here to get better. Dr. Jake Murphy walked through the main medical bay checking on patients. He was the chief medical officer, which meant he was in charge of all the doctors and nurses. Jake loved his job because he got to help beings from across the galaxy. Today he was visiting Krix, a young Zenthari warrior who had lost his leg in battle. The Zenthari looked like humans but had gray skin and white hair. "How are you feeling today, Krix?" Jake asked, sitting beside the bed. The alien warrior tried to smile. "Better, Dr. Murphy. The new leg you gave me works well. I can walk again." Jake nodded. The artificial leg was made from human technology mixed with Zenthari biometal. It would be stronger than his original leg. "Good. You should be able to go home next week." In another part of the ship, 3 floors down, Dr. Amy Collins worked in the neurology section. This was where patients with brain problems came for help. Amy was special because she understood how different alien brains worked. Most human doctors could only help humans, but Amy seemed to know what all kinds of minds needed. She stood in front of a large screen showing brain scans from a Vextar patient. The Vextar were plant-like beings with roots instead of feet and flowers for faces. Their brains were completely different from human brains, but Amy could read their thoughts patterns like a book. "Helen, what do you think about this scan?" Amy asked. A gentle voice came from the computer speakers. "The patient shows signs of memory loss, Dr. Collins, but the pattern is unusual for Vextar physiology." Helen was the ship's medical computer. Her full name was Heuristic Emergency Life Support Enhancement Network, but everyone just called her Helen. She helped all the doctors by storing information about every species in the galaxy. Amy worked with Helen more than anyone else because brain problems were very complicated. Amy studied the scan more carefully. "I think you're right, Helen. This isn't normal memory loss. Something else is causing it." She made notes on her tablet and scheduled the patient for more tests. The Hope's Dawn was special in the galaxy because it followed the Galactic Medical Accord. This was an old agreement that said medical ships could not be attacked during wars. They had to help everyone, even enemies. The ship flew through war zones and dangerous space, but the red crosses on its hull protected it like magic. Captain Stone often got messages from military commanders asking her to refuse treatment to certain species. She always said no. "We heal everyone," she would tell them. "That's what makes us different." In the ship's main dining area, beings from different worlds sat together sharing meals. A group of human nurses talked with Zenthari soldiers about their home planets. Vextar civilians shared their flower wine with curious human doctors. Even some captured pirates who were getting treatment for radiation sickness played card games with their former enemies. Tim Baker, a young human medic, watched this scene with wonder. He had joined the Hope's Dawn 6 months ago, fresh from medical school on Earth. At first, he was scared of the aliens. Now he considered many of them friends. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said Carlos Wright, the ship's chief engineer. He sat down next to Tim with a cup of coffee. "What do you mean?" Tim asked. Carlos pointed around the room. "All these different species sitting together, helping each other heal. My grandfather fought in the human Zenthari War 20 years ago. Now I fix their life support systems and they thank me with gifts." Tim nodded. He understood what Carlos meant. The Hope's Dawn was like a small piece of what the galaxy could be if everyone stopped fighting. Dr. Collins finished her work in the neurology lab and decided to take a walk through the ship. She often did this at the end of her shift, checking on patients and talking with the staff. As she walked, she felt something strange in her mind. It was like a whisper, but not quite a voice. She had felt this before, especially when working with patients who had brain injuries. Amy thought it might be her imagination, but sometimes she seemed to know what patients needed before they told her. Other doctors called it intuition, but Amy wondered if it was something more. In the children's ward, she found a small Vextar girl who was crying. The girl's flower face was wilted and sad. Amy sat beside her bed and gently touched her root hand. "What's wrong, little one?" Amy asked softly. The girl looked up with her large yellow eyes. "I miss my family garden. Will I ever see the sunflowers again?" Amy felt that strange whisper in her mind again. She knew somehow that this child was not just homesick. She was losing connection to her plant nature because she had been away from soil and sunlight too long. "Helen," Amy said quietly, "can you prepare a biogarden simulator in room 12? Full-spectrum light and mineral-rich soil samples." "Of course, Dr. Collins. May I ask why?" Amy smiled at the little girl. "Because sometimes healing means more than just medicine." As the night shift began, Captain Stone made her rounds through the ship. Everything was peaceful. Patients rested safely in their beds. The medical staff worked quietly, monitoring vital signs and adjusting treatments. The Hope's Dawn continued its slow journey through the neutral zone, carrying its precious cargo of healing hope. None of them knew that tomorrow would change everything. None of them suspected that their sanctuary among the stars was about to become a battlefield, and that one human mind would have to save them all. The first explosion shook the entire ship. Dr. Amy Collins was checking on the little Vextar girl when the lights flickered and alarms began, screaming throughout the Hope's Dawn. The ship lurched to one side, throwing Amy against the wall. "Helen, what's happening?" Amy called out as she helped the scared child back into bed. "We are under attack," Helen's voice said, but it sounded strange and broken. "Multiple enemy ships. Weapons fire detected." Amy couldn't believe it. No one attacked medical ships. It was against every law in the galaxy. She ran to the window and saw 3 dark ships firing red plasma beams at the Hope's Dawn. The beams cut through the white hull like hot knives through butter. On the bridge, Captain Lisa Stone gripped her command chair as another blast hit them. "Open all communication channels," she shouted to her crew. "Broadcast our medical status on every frequency." The communications officer, a nervous young man named Pete, worked frantically at his controls. "Broadcasting now, Captain. Full medical identification and neutral status." A harsh voice crackled over the speakers. "This is Commander Vex Thoris of the Iron Claw. Your ship harbors enemy commanders and war criminals. You will be destroyed." "This is Captain Stone of the medical vessel Hope's Dawn," Lisa replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "We are a hospital ship under the Galactic Medical Accord. We treat all species equally and pose no military threat." Commander Thoris laughed coldly. "Your human weakness disgusts me. You heal our enemies so they can fight us again. The Iron Claw recognizes no medical protection for cowards." Another plasma beam struck the ship's shields. The protective energy field flashed bright blue and began to crack. Lisa knew they only had minutes before the shields failed completely. Dr. Jake Murphy was in the main medical bay when the attack began. He was treating a wounded Zenthari soldier when the first blast threw them both to the floor. All around him, patients screamed in terror as medical equipment fell from the walls. "Everyone stay calm," Jake shouted, though his own heart was racing. "Medical staff, secure all patients. Move critical cases to the inner sections of the ship." Tim Baker and the other medics began moving patients away from the outer walls. The young medic's hands shook as he helped an elderly Vextar woman into a mobile bed. He had never been in a battle before. "Dr. Murphy, the children's ward took a direct hit," shouted Nurse Kelly Davis, running into the medical bay with blood on her uniform. "We need help now." Jake grabbed his medical kit and followed Kelly through the damaged corridors. Emergency lighting cast strange red shadows on the walls. They could hear the sound of plasma fire getting closer. The children's ward was a nightmare. The outer wall had been blown away, exposing the room to the vacuum of space. Emergency force fields held the air in, but they were failing. Small alien children cried for their parents while human nurses tried to comfort them. Jake found 3 children with serious injuries. A small Zenthari boy had a broken arm. A young crystal being had cracked along her main body structure. Worst of all, the little Vextar girl that Amy had been helping was unconscious, her flower face completely wilted. "Get them to emergency surgery," Jake ordered, but as he lifted the Vextar child, another plasma blast shook the ship. This time, part of the ceiling collapsed right on top of him. Amy felt the ship shudder again as she ran through the corridors toward the medical bay. The neural whisper in her mind was louder now, filled with pain and fear from all over the ship. She could sense patients dying, medical staff getting hurt, and the ship's systems failing one by one. She reached the main medical bay just as Carlos Wright stumbled in, his engineering uniform torn and burned. "The main power core is damaged," he gasped. "We're losing life support on decks 4 through 7. "How long do we have?" Amy asked. "Maybe an hour before the backup systems fail completely," Carlos replied. "After that, anyone on life support will die." Amy's heart sank. Half the patients on the ship needed machines to keep them alive. Without power, hundreds would die in minutes. Helen's voice came through the speakers, but now it was weak and full of static. "Dr. Collins, I am experiencing system failures. My medical monitoring networks are going offline. I cannot maintain patient care protocols." Another blast hit the ship, this one stronger than before. The shields were completely gone now, and plasma beams were cutting directly into the hull. Amy was thrown to the floor as explosions echoed through the corridors. She crawled to a computer terminal and tried to access the ship's medical network. The screen flickered with error messages. Critical systems were failing everywhere. In the intensive care units, she could see that life support machines were shutting down one by one. "Helen, can you reroute power from non-essential systems?" Amy asked. "Negative, Dr. Collins. Primary power distribution is severely damaged. I cannot maintain full network control." Amy stared at the screen in horror. She could see the vital signs of patients all over the ship. Heart rates dropping, oxygen levels falling, brain activity slowing down. Without the medical network working properly, there was no way to coordinate care for 2,000 patients. Captain Stone's voice came over the ship's communication system, though it was hard to hear through the static. "All hands prepare for evacuation. Repeat, prepare for evacuation." But Amy knew there was no way to evacuate everyone. Many patients couldn't be moved. The transport ships were too small and too few. Most of the beings on this ship would die if they had to abandon it. She thought about Dr. Murphy, who was probably trapped somewhere in the damaged sections. She thought about Tim Baker and the other young medics who had come here to help people. She thought about the little Vextar girl and all the other children who just wanted to go home to their families. The Iron Claw ships moved closer, preparing for their final attack. Commander Thoris wanted to make sure no one survived to tell what had happened here. In his mind, the Hope's Dawn was not a hospital. It was a symbol of everything weak about the other species in the galaxy. Amy looked at the failing medical network one more time. Thousands of red warning lights blinked on the screens. Every light represented someone who was about to die. The ship's computer systems were too damaged for Helen to help everyone. But maybe, Amy thought, there was another way. She remembered the experimental neural interface equipment in her laboratory. It was designed to let surgeons connect their minds directly to medical scanners during brain operations. The technology was dangerous and had never been tested on this scale. But as another plasma blast shook the ship and more warning lights appeared on her screen, Amy realized she might be the only chance these people had. She ran toward her laboratory, dodging falling debris and emergency crews. The neural whisper in her mind was screaming now, filled with the pain of everyone on the ship. It was time to find out if one human mind could save them all. Amy reached her laboratory just as another explosion rocked the ship. The neural interface equipment was still intact, protected in the intersection of the neurology department. The device looked like a silver helmet connected to thick cables that led to the ship's main computer systems. Her hands shook as she powered up the interface. She had only used this equipment a few times before, and never for more than a few minutes. The longest test had been during a complex brain surgery on a Zenthari patient, and that had given her headaches for days. "Helen, are you still online?" Amy asked as she prepared the neural connections. "Partially, Dr. Collins," came the weak reply. "My higher functions are failing. I can maintain basic life support for perhaps 20 more minutes. I need you to help me connect to the medical network. All of it. Every patient monitor, every life support system, every medical scanner on the ship." There was silence for a moment. Then Helen spoke again, her voice puzzled. "Dr. Collins, that would mean processing the medical data of 2,000 patients simultaneously. The human brain cannot handle that much information. It would be dangerous. People are dying, Helen. We're out of options." Amy placed the neural interface helmet on her head. The metal was cold against her skin. She could feel the tiny sensors making contact with her skull, searching for her brain's electrical patterns. The first connection felt like a small electric shock. Suddenly, she could sense the ship's medical network in her mind like a vast web of lights. Each light was a patient, and she could feel their pain, their fear, their fading life energy. Helen, increase the connection strength. I need access to everything. Dr. Collins, I must warn you that, do it now. The world exploded in Amy's mind. Suddenly she could feel every heartbeat on the ship, every breath, every spark of brain activity from 17 different species. The information flooded into her consciousness like a tidal wave. A Xanthari soldier on Deck 5 was going into cardiac arrest. His heart rhythm appeared in Amy's mind as chaotic red patterns. Without thinking, she reached out through the network and activated the automatic defibrillator in his room. The shock restarted his heart, and she felt his relief like a warm glow. On Deck 7, 3 Vextar children were suffocating as their life support failed. Amy rerouted emergency power to their room, feeling their flower faces brighten as oxygen flowed again. But the information kept coming. Too much, too fast. Amy felt her human mind stretching to its limits. She could sense patients in every part of the ship, their medical histories, their current conditions, their needs. The pain was overwhelming. A group of crystal beings was dying from radiation exposure near the hull breach. Amy activated emergency medical drones and guided them through the damaged corridors to deliver treatment. She could feel the crystalline patients' gratitude as healing energy flowed into their fractured bodies. The Iron Claw ships fired again. This blast hit the main power generator, and Amy felt it like a punch to her stomach. Emergency power kicked in, but it wouldn't last long. She had to work faster. Through the ship's internal cameras, Amy could see the damage everywhere. Dr. Murphy was trapped under debris in the children's ward, unconscious and bleeding. Tim Baker was trying to help patients in a medical bay that was filling with smoke. Carlos Wright was desperately trying to reroute power cables. While plasma fire burned through the walls nearby, Amy reached out through the network and activated emergency medical systems she didn't even know existed. Robotic surgical units began operating on critical patients. Automated medicine dispensers started delivering pain relief and life-saving drugs. Environmental systems adjusted to provide the right atmosphere for each species in each room. But controlling all these systems was burning through her human brain like fire. She could feel her own body back in the laboratory, her heart racing, her breathing shallow, blood trickling from her nose. The neural interface was never designed for this level of connection. She sensed something else in the network now. The consciousness of other beings was mixing with her own thoughts. She could feel the brave determination of a Xanthari nurse who was refusing to abandon her patients. She experienced the gentle wisdom of an old Vextar doctor who was comforting frightened children despite his own injuries. She shared the fierce loyalty of a crystal being engineer who was trying to repair life support systems with her bare hands. All these minds, all these different species, were connected through her, and Amy realized something amazing. Despite their different bodies and different worlds, they all wanted the same things. They wanted to live. They wanted to help others. They wanted their loved ones to be safe. The Iron Claw ships were moving in for their final attack. Through the ship's sensors, Amy could detect their weapons charging for one massive blast that would destroy the Hope's Dawn completely. But now, Amy could do something no single person had ever done before. Through the medical network, she was connected to every communication system on the ship. She began broadcasting on all frequencies, sending out everything she was experiencing. The galaxy heard the truth. They felt what Amy felt, the pain of innocent patients being murdered in their beds, the courage of medical staff who refused to abandon their duties, the desperate attempts to save lives while under attack. Amy's consciousness touched communication networks on nearby worlds, spreading the story of what was really happening. On the bridge, Captain Stone was amazed to see her communication systems working perfectly despite all the damage. Messages were going out on channels she didn't even know they had. The truth about the Iron Claw attack was being broadcast across dozens of star systems. Amy felt her connection to the network growing stronger and stranger. She was no longer just Amy Collins from Earth. She was becoming something new, a living bridge between all the minds on the ship, a central nervous system for the floating hospital. Through medical scanners, she could detect the exact brain patterns of the Iron Claw attackers. Their ships were close enough now that the Hope's Dawn sensors could read their neural activity. Amy realized she might be able to do something that had never been done before. The medical scanners were designed to be very precise, able to detect the smallest changes in brain activity. But what if they were reversed? What if instead of reading brain patterns, they could send them? Amy began modifying the scanner systems through pure thought, turning healing devices into something else entirely. She calibrated the frequencies to match the neural patterns of the Iron Claw species. She wouldn't hurt them, but she could do something else. As the enemy ships prepared to fire their final shots, Amy sent a focused electromagnetic pulse toward them. The pulse was carefully tuned to their species' brain frequency, not enough to cause damage, but enough to cause temporary confusion and disorientation. The Iron Claw ships suddenly stopped their attack. Inside their vessels, the crews were experiencing severe dizziness and confusion. Their targeting systems went offline as their operators couldn't focus properly. Amy felt a moment of triumph, but the effort had cost her. She could feel her connection to her own body getting weaker. The neural interface was burning out her nervous system. She might be able to save everyone else, but she was probably going to die in the process. Through the network, she sensed that help was coming. Her broadcasts had reached military fleets from a dozen different worlds. Ships were jumping to hyperspace, racing to help the Hope's dawn. But they were still hours away. Amy had to keep everyone alive until then, even if it killed her. Amy's consciousness spread through the ship like water flowing through every crack and corridor. She was no longer just one person. She was the nervous system of the entire Hope's dawn. Through thousands of sensors and cameras, she could see everything that was happening. The Iron Claw ships were still confused from her electromagnetic pulse, but Commander Thoris was fighting back. His voice crackled over the communication channels, angry and frustrated. "What kind of weapon was that?" he demanded. "Answer me." Amy decided to respond. Using the ship's communication systems, she spoke directly to him. Her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "This is Dr. Amy Collins of the medical vessel Hope's Dawn. We are not armed. We are healers." "Impossible," Thoris snarled. "No single person could control an entire ship's systems." "You're right," Amy replied, and for the first time she truly understood what she had become. "I'm not just one person anymore. I am everyone on this ship who refuses to give up. I am every patient who wants to live, every doctor who swears to heal, every nurse who won't abandon their duties." Through the medical network, Amy continued her impossible task of keeping 2,000 patients alive. In the surgery rooms, she guided robotic arms through complex operations that would normally require teams of specialists. On Deck 9, she helped Tim Baker perform emergency surgery on a Zenthari child, feeding him information about alien anatomy directly through the ship's communication system. "Tim, you need to avoid the secondary heart chamber," Amy's voice whispered in his earpiece. "Zenthari have 2 hearts, remember? The child's main heart is damaged, but the backup can keep him alive if you connect it to the primary circulation system." Tim's hands moved carefully, guided by Amy's knowledge. He had never operated on a Zenthari before, but somehow he felt like he knew exactly what to do. "How do you know all this, Dr. Collins?" "I can feel his heart beating, Tim. I can sense what his body needs." Across the ship, similar miracles were happening. Carlos Wright was repairing power systems with Amy's help, as she guided him to damaged cables and showed him which connections to make. She could sense the electrical flow through the ship's systems like blood through veins. "Carlos, reroute power from the observation deck to the intensive care unit," Amy instructed. "The children there need life support more than we need pretty views of space." "Got it, Doc," Carlos replied, amazed at how perfectly the repairs were working. It was like the ship itself was helping him fix it, but Amy was fighting a war on multiple fronts. The Iron Claw ships had recovered from her first pulse and were preparing to attack again. Through the ship's sensors, she could detect their weapon systems charging up. She needed help, and she found it in an unexpected place. The captured Iron Claw pirates who had been receiving treatment in the prison medical ward were listening to everything that was happening. One of them, a scarred warrior named Kresh, began laughing. "Commander Thoris is a fool," Kresh said to his fellow prisoners. "He's attacking healers. Even we have honor codes against that." Through the ship's internal communications, Amy heard this and made a decision that shocked everyone. She opened the prison medical ward doors. "What are you doing?" Captain Stone's voice came over the intercom, worried and confused. "Kresh," Amy said, speaking directly to the pirate leader. "Your people are dying too. The ship's life support systems are failing everywhere. Help us save everyone, and I'll make sure you're treated fairly when this is over." Kresh stared at the open door for a moment, then looked at his wounded companions. Many of them owed their lives to the human doctors who had treated them. They had expected to be executed or tortured, but instead had received the same care as everyone else. "You humans are either very brave or very stupid," Kresh said. Then he stood up despite his injuries. "But you healed my son when your own people were dying. I will help." The freed pirates spread through the ship, helping to move patients and assist the medical staff. Their strength and knowledge of their own species' biology proved invaluable. Amy coordinated their efforts through the network, turning former enemies into allies. Meanwhile, her broadcasts were having an effect across the galaxy. On 12 different worlds, military fleets received the transmissions showing the attack on the hospital ship. The images were horrifying. Patients being killed in their beds, children crying for their parents, medical staff dying while trying to save lives. Admiral Sarah Kim of the Human Defense Force was the first to respond. All ships emergency jumped to the Kepler sector. "We have a medical vessel under attack." Similar orders went out from Zenthari Command, the Vextar Harmony Council, and even the Crystal Collective. Species that had been at war with each other for years suddenly found themselves united in outrage. Back on the Hope's Dawn, Amy sensed the approaching fleets through deep space sensors. But they were still 3 hours away, and the ship couldn't last that long. The Iron Claw was preparing for a final massive attack that would destroy them completely. Amy made another desperate decision. Using the ship's medical scanners, she began a detailed analysis of the Iron Claw crews. She could read their brain patterns, their stress levels, their psychological profiles. What she found surprised her. Most of the Iron Claw soldiers didn't really want to be here. They were following orders from Commander Thoris, but many of them were uncomfortable with attacking a medical ship. Amy could sense their doubt, their guilt, their growing horror at what they were doing. She decided to speak to them directly. "Iron Claw soldiers," her voice broadcast to all 3 enemy ships. "I know you can hear me. I am Dr. Amy Collins, and I can sense your thoughts through our medical scanners." There was silence on the Iron Claw ships. Several crew members looked around nervously. "You didn't sign up to murder children in hospital beds," Amy continued. "You joined the Iron Claw to fight warriors, not to slaughter patients. I can feel your shame and disgust. You know this is wrong." On the flagship, Commander Thoris screamed at his crew. "Don't listen to her! She's trying to trick you with some kind of mind control." But Amy pressed on. "Look at your sensors. Look at what we really are. We're doctors and nurses from 17 different species, working together to heal people. We've treated your own wounded. We've saved the lives of Iron Claw prisoners. Is this really what you want to destroy?" On one of the smaller Iron Claw ships, the crew began to waver. Amy could sense their mental conflict reaching a breaking point. She decided to show them something that would change everything. Through the ship's communication systems, she transmitted live feeds from inside the Hope's Dawn. The Iron Claw soldiers could see the truth. Human doctors working desperately to save alien children. Wounded enemies being treated with the same care as friends. Former pirates helping to move patients to safety. The smaller ship suddenly stopped firing. Its captain, a battle-hardened warrior named Vex, made an announcement that shocked everyone. "This is Captain Vex of the Iron Claw vessel Death's Edge. We withdraw from this attack." "We will not fire on healers." Commander Thoris was furious. "Vex, you coward!" "I order you to resume firing." "No, Commander. Find your honor. This is murder, not war." Amy felt a surge of hope as the Death's Edge pulled away from the battle, but Thoris and his remaining ships were more determined than ever. They began charging their weapons for one final devastating attack that would destroy the hospital ship completely. Amy gathered all her remaining strength. She was dying. She could feel her body shutting down in the laboratory, her brain burning out from the neural overload. But she had one last card to play. Using every medical scanner on the ship, she created the most powerful electromagnetic pulse she could manage. This time she aimed it not just at the Iron Claw ships, but broadcast it across all communication frequencies in the sector. The pulse carried a simple message, the exact location of the Hope's Dawn, and a desperate plea for help. But more than that, it carried Amy's own feelings, her determination to save everyone, her love for all the beings she was protecting. The message reached the rescue fleets and gave them the exact coordinates they needed. More importantly, it reached something else. Automated emergency beacons throughout the sector began repeating the signal. creating a chain of communication that spread the story across the entire galaxy. Commander Thoris fired his final shot, just as the first rescue ships dropped out of hyperspace. But he was too late. Admiral Kim's fleet opened fire on the Ironclaw vessels, and the battle was over in minutes. Amy had done it. She had saved them all. But as the rescue ships docked with the Hope's Dawn, she could feel her consciousness fading. The neural interface had burned out most of her brain's electrical activity. In her laboratory, her body lay still, connected to the helmet that had allowed her to become something more than human. But she had paid the ultimate price for the miracle she had performed. Admiral Sarah Kim was the first to board the Hope's Dawn after the rescue. She expected to find a ship full of dead and dying patients. Instead, she found something impossible. A floating hospital where every patient was stable. Every life support system was working perfectly, and the medical staff was calm and efficient despite the damage around them. "How is this possible?" she asked Captain Stone, who was bandaged but alert on the bridge. "Dr. Amy Collins," Stone replied simply. She connected herself to the ship's medical network and kept everyone alive. She became the ship's brain. Admiral Kim hurried to the neurology laboratory where she found Amy's body lying motionless on the floor. The neural interface helmet was still on her head, but smoke was rising from the burned-out equipment. Dr. Murphy, who had been rescued from the debris and treated for his injuries, was checking Amy's vital signs. "Is she?" Kim began. "Alive, but changed," Murphy said quietly. "Her brain patterns are unlike anything I've ever seen. It's like she's still connected to something even though the equipment is destroyed." As rescue teams spread through the ship, they discovered the full scope of what Amy had accomplished. In 4 hours of neural connection, she had performed the work of 100 medical professionals. Patients who should have died were recovering. Complex surgeries had been completed by medical robots guided by her consciousness. Life support systems had been perfectly balanced for the needs of 17 different species. Tim Baker found Amy's body and knelt beside her. "Dr. Collins, can you hear me?" Amy's eyes fluttered open. They looked different now, deeper somehow, as if she was seeing more than just what was in front of her. When she spoke, her voice was soft but seemed to carry echoes of other voices. "Tim, how are the patients?" "They're all stable thanks to you. All 1,047 survivors are going to be okay." Amy closed her eyes, and Tim could swear he saw her smile slightly. She had saved almost everyone on the ship. Only the patients who died in the first few minutes of the attack had been lost. Over the following days, as the Hope's Dawn was towed to a repair station, the full story of what had happened spread across the galaxy. The broadcasts that Amy had sent out during the attack were played on every news network. Beings from hundreds of worlds watched in amazement as they saw one human mind take control of an entire hospital ship to save patients from 17 different species. The political impact was immediate and massive. The Ironclaw faction found themselves abandoned by their former allies. Even their own people were disgusted by the attack on a medical ship. Commander Thoris was arrested and faced war crimes charges on 12 different worlds. But the most important changes were happening to Amy herself. As she recovered in the ship's medical bay, she discovered that the neural interface had left her permanently altered. She could still sense the emotional and physical state of any being near her. When she walked through the corridors, she could feel the contentment of healing patients, the dedication of the medical staff, even the guilt and shame of the former Ironclaw prisoners who were now helping with repairs. "It doesn't hurt," she told Dr. Murphy during one of her examinations. "It's actually beautiful. I can feel how connected we all are, regardless of what species we belong to." Murphy was worried about her. "Amy, you nearly died. The neural pathways in your brain have been completely rewired. We don't know what the long-term effects might be." "I know exactly what the effects are, Jake," Amy replied, and her voice carried that strange echo again. "I can sense the health and well-being of everyone around me. I can tell when someone is sick or injured or sad, and I can help them in ways I never could before." As if to prove her point, she turned toward the door just as Carlos Wright walked in. "Carlos, you should have that pain in your left shoulder looked at. It's not just muscle strain. You have a small fracture in your collarbone from when the debris fell on you." Carlos stared at her in amazement. He hadn't told anyone about his shoulder, and it had only been bothering him slightly. "How did you?" "I can feel it," Amy said simply. "Just like I can feel that Tim is worried about his sister back on Earth. and that Captain Stone is proud of her crew but guilty about the patients we lost. Word of Amy's abilities spread quickly through the medical community. Doctors and scientists from across the galaxy came to study what had happened to her. They found that her brain now processed information in ways that seemed impossible. She could understand the medical needs of any species just by being near them. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a specialist in alien neurology, ran extensive tests on Amy's brain patterns. "It's like she's developed a universal medical intuition," Elena explained to her colleagues. "She can diagnose conditions in species she's never encountered before. Just by sensing their biological rhythms, Amy used her new abilities to revolutionize medical care on the rebuilt Hope's Dawn. She could walk through a ward and immediately identify patients who needed attention, even before their symptoms showed up on medical scanners. She could sense when treatments weren't working and suggest alternatives that seemed to come from nowhere, but always proved correct. More importantly, she began training other medical professionals in what she had learned during her neural connection. She couldn't give them her abilities, but she could teach them to recognize the universal patterns of health and sickness that existed across all species. "Pain is the same whether you're human or Xanthari or Vextar," she explained to a class of young doctors. "The desire to heal is universal. When you understand that, you can help anyone, regardless of what they look like or where they come from." The Hope's Dawn became famous throughout the galaxy. Beings traveled from distant worlds just to be treated by the ship where one human mind had saved thousands of lives. But more than that, it became a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they worked together. Captain Stone was promoted to admiral and given command of a fleet of new medical vessels, all designed using principles learned from Amy's experience. The neural interface technology was improved and made safer, allowing other doctors to connect with ship systems for short periods during emergencies. Tim Baker became one of Amy's first students in universal medical techniques. Under her guidance, he learned to treat patients from species he had never encountered before. "Dr. Collins taught me that healing is about more than just medicine," he said. "It's about understanding that we're all connected." Even the former Ironclaw prisoners were changed by their experience. Kresh, the pirate leader who had helped during the attack, requested to remain on the ship as a security officer. "I spent years hurting people," he told Amy. "Let me spend the rest of my life protecting them." 5 years after the attack, Dr. Amy Collins stood in the new Interspecies Medical Center, a massive station built using technology developed from her neural interface breakthrough. Around her, doctors and nurses from dozens of worlds worked together, sharing knowledge and techniques that crossed species barriers. She watched a young Xanthari surgeon successfully operate on a crystal being patient, using skills that had been thought impossible just a few years ago. In another room, a Vextar healer was teaching human doctors how to use plant-based medicines that worked on any carbon-based life form. The center was everything the Hope's Dawn had represented, but bigger and better. It was a place where the galaxy's greatest healers came to learn from each other, breaking down the barriers that had kept species apart for centuries. Amy still carried the neural echoes from her time connected to the ship. When she walked through the medical center, she could sense the contentment of patients being healed, the excitement of doctors learning new techniques, the satisfaction of nurses seeing their patients recover. But most of all, she could feel something that had grown stronger every year since the attack. The understanding that all sentient beings, regardless of their appearance or origin, shared the same fundamental desires. They wanted to live, to be healthy, to care for their loved ones, to find meaning in their existence. The attack on the Hope's Dawn had been intended to show the galaxy that different species could never truly cooperate. Instead, it had proven exactly the opposite. One human mind, connected to the suffering and hope of beings from 17 worlds, had demonstrated that compassion was truly universal. And as Amy watched a group of young medical students from 8 different species working together to save a patient's life, she knew that the tide of galactic conflict had indeed turned forever, not through weapons or politics, but through the simple recognition that healing was something all beings could share. The neural whisper in her mind, which had once been filled with pain and fear, now carried only hope and understanding. She had become something new that day when she connected her mind to the ship, not just human, but a bridge between all the thinking beings in the galaxy. And through her students and colleagues, that bridge continued to grow stronger every day.